Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Nishant, and welcome to another episode of the Nishant Garg Show. The mission of the show is to spread awareness on mindfulness practices, psychology, mental health, and spirituality. My job on the show is to invite world-class performers to share the practices to live a fulfilled life. And this episode guest is Destiny Rael. Destiny is a transformational life coach, loss and grief coach. She has also served as an advocate, speaker, mentor, and certified trained crisis counselor for organizations such as Peace Over Violence. Currently, she is a grief support leader for a center named Our House Grief Support Center in Los Angeles. She is also a co-founder of SoulShift. After she lost her brother, she has found ways to incorporate her grief and pain into her life to serve a greater purpose and move ahead. In this episode, she will talk about the grief process and how to move forward with this to live a fulfilled life. And here is Destiny. Destiny, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm thrilled and excited to have you on the show. And I want to start with something very funny, that you have a tattoo of elephant on your left arm. Please tell us about that to our listeners.
Wow, you do your research. That is amazing that you have that. Yeah. So, elephants are very impactful and inspiring and, mean a lot to me. But just briefly, the original inspiration that started, which has evolved since that. But I had read a book many years ago, and I want to say it was a Wayne Dyer book, and I can't remember which one it is. There's so many, and for yourself and those listening, I'm sure they're familiar with Dr. Wayne Dyer, but he mentioned a story that he didn't create. He was sharing a story that, has been translated many times, but the gist of the story was that, the idea that when you train an elephant or a baby elephant, usually they have them chained to, against a fence or a wall, and, they have to train them and, to keep them pretty much constrained, and so they don't go away or run away, I should say. Well, as an elephant grows into its power and grows into the many tons that it weighs, it could easily walk or just bust through the chains, right? But because it's so conditioned and so trained all those years in training, that it doesn't even attempt to break free of the chains. So when I read that, it was so profound for me, because I was at a space in my life, probably about 15 years ago at this time, that I felt very bound by, a lot of old beliefs, the ways of thinking that were not mine. And I can articulate that even better now, but at the time, it made sense when I didn't really know how it made sense to me. But I knew that I had some freeing of myself, that I need to release the chains that bound me and find my power and my strength. So from that point, elephants started showing up, not literally. There were not elephants walking around on my street, but symbolism of elephants. I mean, no joke, just were coming into my experience. And then it became known within family and friends that now I have elephant, paraphernalia everywhere. I mean, if you saw my house right now, I have elephants everywhere. So they've definitely gained a lot of symbolism. And I've gone on to learn more about their being and them as animals, and just their spiritual awareness, their wisdom, how they grieve, and just amazing, amazing beings. So all that to say is that I did feel I wanted to, have this marking, this tattoo. And then the specifics of my tattoo also have other symbolism. I've always been drawn to different cultures, Middle Eastern and Indian culture, and just the aesthetic and the beauty of that. And then if you were to really look at my tattoo, there's the trunk that goes up, but it symbolizes a J, which is the name of my brother, the initial J for Joseph, and also January. And he was born January 6th, and he passed January 8th. And so there's this 6 in the elephant ear, and there's an 8 in the elephant ear. So anyway, to answer your question, there's a lot of symbolism in what elephants represent and mean, and it has evolved, and still to this day, it's part of my branding and my business, and just, so.
When you see that elephant on your arm, what else does it remind you?
I think that's a great question. I mean, it always reminds me that we have the power to change, to shift, to release, to transform, to break free, to renew, to rebuild, to start again. Always, 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 that we're not bound by anything, even our own. What might have been true for us last week can change. Speaking of Dr. Wayne Dyer, for some reason he's coming up a lot in this already in the session or in this conversation, but there's another kind of a quote. I don't want to speak on something unless I completely memorize it, but the gist was, be wary of the man that tells you on Monday what he's going to do Wednesday when he hasn't seen Tuesday yet. So meaning, every day is a new day to renew, and every day, you don't know what tomorrow holds. So when I look at this tattoo, it's always an opportunity that I always want to stay curious, and I always stay open, and I always want to stay willing to change my mind, because I don't want to be bound even by my own convictions. And there's of course power in convictions and principles and things we stand by and stand for, but that can change. So it's always a reminder that to be free and to be open, and that can coexist with convictions and truth.
By the way, I'm a huge fan of Dr. Wayne Dyer. I've been following him for the last 3 years, and he is a game changer. I have about 10 paintings, and those paintings have quotes from Dr. Wayne Dyer. So I understand what you're saying. Change your thoughts, change your life. And one painting that I have in front of me right now from Dr. Wayne Dyer is, when you have the choice between being right and being kind, just choose kind. And life is all about learning. And one of the most memorable ways of learning something is by messing up. Miracle come in moments. Be ready and willing to receive them. By the way, I digressed.
I love that, though. I mean, even just you saying that quote, I think of that a lot. And Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life is a powerful book that changed my life, literally. So yeah, I'm with you. Such a profound spiritual teacher that has definitely been a part of my growth and spiritual awareness and awakening. And so yeah, digress, bring back, come back. That's the whole point. It's just, you just be open with the flow of things. So.
And just do you, as part of your coaching, I will come back to your coaching process, but do you suggest any symbol to people so that they can live a fulfilled life?
That's a good question. Do I suggest any symbol? Part of my coaching, which, like you said, what I'm open in how I coach, I would probably not suggest, as opposed to ask and help that person define a symbolism. And now, that being said, there's times that I will use tools and, questioning, or even an elephant. Let's say I showed you an elephant and just asked you in a coaching process, like, what does this elephant symbolize for you? And oftentimes when you start asking people questions, they start coming up with all kinds of different things that, really highlight and illuminate things that are a part of their thinking or their growth or their expansion or their truth inside. So to answer your question, I don't know that I would necessarily suggest or give them like, here's this thing that I want you to take a part of your life. But, if in my coaching, I have things all over me. I have a snake, not literally. Again, I'm not a safari in here, but I have a lot of symbolisms, and I have a snake on the ground. And I had a client once very drawn to the snake. And so I asked her, I said, well, what is the snake representing for you? And she said that she used to be very, very scared of snakes when she was young, and just such a fear. And so seeing it reminded her of releasing her fear, and that she can confront anything. Now, what's interesting about that is very different as to why I have a snake symbol in my apartment. Snakes symbolize shedding and regrowth and renewal. So the point that I'm making is that for her, had I said, hey, look at this snake and here's what it means, and this is what I want you to take, I think I would have done a disservice to her, because the truth is that it represented something to her. And when she saw it, it really awakened her to her own, reminder that she confronts her fears and she released her fears. And for me, it represents something different. And in that conversation, I shared why that the snake represented, and it added to, her thoughts, but that was up to her to decide or determine if that resonated or not. Does that make sense? So I hope that answered your question.
It can be a reminder. That's all. I mean, any symbol can be a reminder, and we can always incorporate new symbols in our life, and they can change and evolve from time to time. For you, elephant has been a life changer. So it's just a reminder, and we can have any sort of reminder in our life.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be tattooed on your body.
No. It doesn't. How symbols and things that represent can show up in different ways in our lives. I happen to feel like I wanted it marked. And that, by the way, it took a few years, that wasn't overnight, but yeah, we all can. I think there's signs and symbolism in everything and all around us if we pay attention. And it's not, I think the real work of a coach or a guide or leader or a teacher or anybody is to help people access their own truth and realizations and symbolism, and not for you to tell them, so.
And these days we have different kinds of coaches. Why did you only pick loss and grief coaching?
Oh, well, I mean, for clarity, I do consider myself a transformational life coach and loss coach. And so what that means for me is that I think everything, if you're living and breathing, it's all life coaching, So sometimes we initiate change. Sometimes we are trying to seek change and renewal and transformation. And we feel stuck in life, and we know that something's not working anymore, but we're not sure how or where. So I would consider that part of like the life coaching. But energetically and spiritually, somebody that has gone through a loss, and specifically loss by death. So there is loss of perhaps job or relationship or parts of ourselves or various ambiguous types of loss, which is still there's a grief in that. To me, that is still very different than someone that has lost someone by death. So I kind of break up my coaching in those three different categories, even though it's under the umbrella of life, because it's how do we get through this life with these areas. So somebody that is in a seeking change is going to be a different energetic force than someone that has change thrust upon them. We're in that right now. Look at this pandemic. Many people were going along, and boom, overnight the world has changed. Job loss, situations, now they're thrust in being isolated. Every situation is different. So that is a major, I would say, transition, and there's a loss and grief around that. Then you have those that are, as we speak, dealing with those that have died through coronavirus. And so they're grieving that part. So getting back to the coaching is that I'm very sensitive and specific of how I would coach somebody that is on their own, just thriving and wanting to seek something new. It's going to be different than the energetic force of, I didn't want this change. I didn't seek this. I didn't want this to happen. But now what? How do I get through this? What I can't even see the future. I didn't choose this. But now how do you have them renew their lives and find hope in that? So that's pretty much how the areas that I coach. And then the reason why is that I've gone through all of those things. And I don't mean to, if you hear a chuckle in my voice, it's not from laughing out of hysterics, more of just, I've lived it all. And I've been through a tragic loss in my life and grief, and one of which my brother who passed away, as you and I shared a little bit ago, which just put me on a whole different trajectory of my life and grief. So that was not overnight, by the way. I mean, I had a long grieving process myself, but was already on a path of counseling and doing crisis counseling and being a part of just, helping people in their lives. And it then got more specific as a grief support leader and grief. So I would say that sort of niche, if you will. I hate to say a niche as if but I guess it is. It's an area of focus that I really want to help and serve people in dealing and navigating their way and healing through loss and death. So I hope that answered that.
How did your brother died?
So, yeah, my brother passed away January 8th, 2011, 2 days after his birthday. And it was very sudden. And, he was just turned 34. Life of, he and I were just writing a song together. We did music, and he was an amazing artist and songwriter and singer. And he had what they call aortic dissection. We didn't know this at the time, of course, but so it's basically the aorta that's behind the heart. So it's not a heart condition. A lot of people don't fully understand that, nor would I have until I've sadly been educated on it. But we all have our aorta, which is like the main, piping, if you will, that flows all the blood throughout our bodies, and it dissects. So it tears, and then the blood starts bleeding out. Basically, it's still, it's so hard to speak that out loud, but he had experienced 2 weeks prior chest pains, and he had called me, and that was a whole thing. And we thought it was stress, and, because, who would have thought that in a million years? I would have never thought that was what was really happening and going on. And he was dealing with some stress. But, from what I've now understood, and there's many resources out there now about aortic dissection, although it is rare, that it can be very, very fatal, obviously, if once that tear happens in that aorta, if it's not repaired. And even if it is repaired, it still can be pretty dangerous. But anyway, he just won on a Saturday and didn't show up for work. So that's how he passed.
Yeah, this is very tough. And thanks for explaining through what happened. I would like to ask you that a lot of people go through the same situation. Their loved ones die, and they may not have all the tools to overcome the grief process and to come in agreement, so to speak, with that tragedy. How did you accept, or if you did accept, how did you go through that process after that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I would say, I like how you caught that how did I accept, or did I accept? And I think that is a process, because there are days still, even in my work, even being a grief support leader, even being a grief counselor, even with all the education, even with grieving and being in so much pain, there are days that I have still felt like, wait, what? Did this happen? This isn't real. So there are times that I feel like I have not fully accepted it. And that is the truth. But as far as overall, I think I'm not a big fan of, when time heals all wounds. I don't think that that's true. I do think that time can lessen sometimes, and sometimes then time also reveals, truths. But what I will say is that it has definitely been a journey of true grieving and grief and, despair and, many dark days. Some things were, healthier choices and keeping myself busy, and some were not so healthy choices that I, didn't know how to deal properly until I just made a decision that I shouldn't even say I made a decision. I felt through all of the times, and I have always felt very connected spiritually and very, always on the path of spiritual awakening and seeking, and long before of course, life or, when you deal with death or loss like that, it can catapult you into seeking what is real, what's truth, what matters, why are we here, all those questions. So, but I've always been that type of seeker. And I started to slowly get back into being open to receive messages and receive connection. And I had profound spiritual connections to my brother, and that, I think would blow people's mind, if you will. And I think that was a part of the helping me process and move to a space of acceptance. And another key thing that helped me is, I feel like I want to say my brother and I were very, very, very close. I mean, we're a year and a half apart. We moved out here for music. We were best friends. We lived together for a long time. And then, of course he, moved on to have roommates and stuff, but our worlds were interconnected. To this day, his, friends are some of my best friends. So it was beyond a tragic loss for me. And, people with good intention want to say, oh, your brother would want this, or your brother would want you to move on, or your brother would want you to sing again, or your brother would want you to do this or that. It took me a while, a long time, 7 years, quite frankly, for me to start to move in that space. But once I did, I felt it was like I catapulted in all these things in my life that I just knew, like, okay, it's time. My brother.
Have you moved on completely?
No. I don't like saying moved on. I like saying moving forward. That's a big part of the language I use.
What's the difference?
I coach. Moving on says I'm leaving something behind and I'm moving on. Moving forward says I'm moving forward and I'm taking things with me. So you get to choose and decide what, and that could be applied to anything, right? So me, I feel like I've moved forward with my life. I'm allowing my life to grow and expand, allowing some happiness and joy, allowing myself to live again. But I also feel I have, I'm getting so choked up saying this, but that he's with me, that it doesn't mean that I have to let go or I have to move away from. Does that make sense?
This is very, very powerful distinction, that moving on is something we are leaving few things or something in the past, but moving forward is we are carrying those memories. Mm-hmm. We are carrying those people's memories with us in the present moment, and in the future because we can't change the outer circumstances. It happened. And we have to live our life with what we have, and we have to go through the same process. Mm-hmm. So as a listener, if I've gone through some death of loved ones in my past, then how should I start to really work on this grieving process? What advice would you give?
Oh, that's a great question. I think there's a few things I want to say with that. One, I think everyone's grief process is different. And I think that there is no right or wrong. Grief is not a mental illness. It's not something wrong with you. It is something that we are reacting to and responding to something very painful that has happened. I do think that it helps having support and resources to help you move through that, whether that is a counselor, whether that's support groups, whether that's even friends and family, although that can be tricky sometimes, because if you have friends and family grieving themselves, we tend to withhold our grief. But what I would advise is that the process of it really is navigating, and there is no linear process. It's not like, okay, now in 3 months, you're going to go through this, and then the next 3 months, you're going to go through this, and the next 3 months, you're going to go through this. In my experience, and even professionally speaking and understanding as a grief counselor and working with those in grief, you might have days that you're feeling, somewhat that you can wake up in the morning and get through the day. And then there's days that it doesn't. And then there's days you're hopeful. Then there's days that it is a process. And the advice I would give is the more you allow and embrace yourself to be in the fullness of what you're experiencing, you actually allow to be in your grief. And that really is the moving forward process. When you negate it or deny it or try to get over it, quote unquote, or not feel it. And look, I get it. It hurts. There were days that I literally could not go there. I had to, just pretend like, okay. So we do things in our defenses and our mechanisms to function in life. But that's why I really think if you can seek guidance and seek tools and seek, I think support groups. I've seen the value in that, and just knowing you're not alone, knowing that there's people that are going through the same thing, and having that space and freedom to just grieve, bawl your eyes out, feel the pain, whatever that is. I think that is actually a very healthy way of processing.
Could you recommend some practices such as meditation or any practices to really able to sit with that feeling, to embrace that pain? Because that is very difficult for a lot of people to embrace that pain. We all have some sort of pain, and sometimes we deny that. We try to escape from that, and we just feel it and just say, this is what it is. We can change it. Just feel it, do it, and move on. So how should we embrace those painful moments? How should we embrace those grief memories?
Yeah, I just, again, want to just say I fully recognize how difficult that is and how painful it is. And as far as the process or tools, I love meditation. I think meditation is very different. I'm sorry, very important, but it can be depending on the mindset. Sometimes with meditation, the practice is to sort of get out of your, kind of go somewhere else. With the intention to really feel your feelings. I love the idea of journaling, and I'm a big proponent. It's a big part of my coaching, exercises and tools. So let's say you are meditating and you're really feeling sad, right? Or you're feeling even anger or frustration or whatever comes up as it associates with your grief. I would encourage those to ask, what is my sadness asking of me right now? Tell me more about that sadness. What is the sadness wanting to express? What is it needing from me? If you imagine like a little kid, or even a pet or someone, anything that's vulnerable looking at you, like, love me, feel me, whatever. We tend to be a little bit more attentive to that, but we're not always attentive to ourselves and what we're really experiencing. So if you were to actually have a conversation with your feelings, conversation with what's happening. So whether that's literally journaling, which I'm a big proponent of, or if you are in meditation and just asking, what can I do for this sadness? What is the sadness wanting? What would your sadness say back? So I encourage to kind of go deeper into that. And the answer very well might just be, I just want you to cry. Just let this out. Sometimes sadness can be associated with love. I'm really sad because I loved my brother so much. And then that can lead to laughter because I'm laughing about some memory. But something is calling you. Something is being asked to release and express. And so when you ask yourself and allow that, it can be really profound and releasing and cathartic. And that's, to me, embracing. And those would be tools. And of course, if I were coaching somebody or even in a grief support group, there actually are tools like exercises we do, that are really helpful to access those emotions and also within a safe space to do that where you're not just left on your own.
Could you speak of some of those practices? I know that it may be difficult to explain all the practices and exercises. If your favorite practice comes to your mind.
Yeah, we have one in the one grief group that we do in the organization. And then I've also kind of borrowed on that in my own personal work for myself and coaching, but they're very powerful. But there's two exercises. One is a letter to, where you actually write a letter to your loved one. And, some of them have journal prompts such as, I missed the time that, or I was sorry that, or I wish I would have said this, or I wish you would have said this. And, there's different prompts that it can be so, so, so powerful in writing that letter to that loved one. And then the other side of it is the other part of the exercise is that you write a letter from your loved one. And to me, that was that from my own experience, and then even just witnessing from the many people that have written that letter of what they were able to tune into their loved one and I'm getting choked up as I say it, but what their loved ones would actually say to them. And it's such a profound, remarkable experience and exercise. And another thing I was just going to say, one of my own personal things, I actually set up an email account, literally. I set up a Gmail email account that is only reserved for when I journal my brother. So I feel like I'm sending my brother, I just journal to him. And it's very different than journaling about my grief. I literally will just write to him, and just tell him.
So you write through email?
Yeah. So I most of my journaling is through email because I type very fast and I like that. I like that process.
So who receives those emails?
So I am the owner of the email. So I don't check it, but it's still, if anyone that's set up an account, right? So it happens to be Gmail. This is not a plug for Google or Gmail, but it just so happens to be a Gmail account. But I set up a Gmail account specifically so I could just, I feel like it's just sending out there in the universe of wherever my brother is. So it's probably a whole list of emails that I've never read or checked on, but I technically am the owner of it. But I feel, and that account is set up specifically with the intention, energetically and spiritually, to go to him. And I feel like it gets it. So I've actually advised, again, I don't like to necessarily say advise, but I guess in a way, but I've used that a lot in my coaching, and I've had a few people tell me they've done something similar, and it's been very powerful for them. So that's another thing I would suggest, if that would be helpful.
Would you ever go and check those emails?
Oh man. Wow. Would I ever? I mean, I guess I could, and I would never say I would not, but I have not.
One of the practices that one of my past guests recommended that, and she had near-death experience long time ago, and she mentioned that. So we were talking about hell, hell, how it feels like to be in the hell, what is hell and what is heaven, and all those stories. And she mentioned that just write a love letter to your loved one who has passed away, and then burn that letter. And when you burn that letter, the fumes will go into the heaven. I don't know how it looks like, what is a science or spiritual side behind that, but she recommended to burn that letter and then just feel that they are receiving your energy, because they can see everything.
Absolutely. I love that. And that really is this similar intention of the exercises that I just shared with you. It's whether you're writing down, when I mentioned the letter to and letter from, those were physical letters that you write, whether it's an email, but it really, as with anything, it's all with an intention, right? So what is the intention? And, the idea, sometimes of burning is it's a release, or if the physical smoke of that burning is energetically going to that person. I burn a lot of incense for that reason alone. So, I love the symbolism of all those ideas. But what I would say is, whatever you do, if you can tune into and connect to yourself and the intent of what you are communicating and sharing, it won't matter whether it's an email, if you burn it, if you put it in a, box, if you, literally send it, put it in a bottle in the ocean and throw it away, whatever seriously it is, that intent will get there. I really, really believe that. And sometimes you even get messages back spiritually, so.
And what does a grief feel like?
Oh my gosh. What doesn't
This is my last question on this grief process.
No. I mean, of course, I think these are wonderful questions, and, you're giving your audience a tangible way, but I think, it can feel like, I'll say that. I don't want to be that. I think I'm an expert of my own grief, but we're all experts of our own grief. So everyone's grief is unique to their own. But in general speaking, grief can feel like a tidal wave. I think it can feel like a weight that is so heavy that you can barely, lift off the ground. It can be a weight of deep, deep sorrow and sadness and pain and physical pain and devastation and anger and frustration. And yet, in an odd way, there's a mix of, sometimes even joy that comes in the memories of, whatever you might experience depending on the relationship you have. But in general, I will say, I think, and have experienced, grief can be very painful, and physically, physiologically, spiritually, mentally, it's all encompassing. So your body might experience different things, like, labored breathing or anxiety or hives. Sometimes some people lose appetite. Some people all they do is eat. They might make some choices of feeling that they want to do, drink more or calm their mind, do a recreational type drug type things. If we're talking physically, there's mental, and you start, you lose your cognitive functioning, you're foggy brained, you don't remember what you did 2 minutes ago. So, I mean, there's just so many different various ways of how grief shows up and expresses itself, whether, like I said, mind, body, soul. But I would say it's a tidal wave of emotions that can ebb and flow.
And what kind of spiritual practices do you have in your day-to-day life?
Oh, for me, I would say just staples. Over the years, I have gone and tried many different things, and I'm open and love many spiritual practices. But I would say for me, meditation, hiking, believe it or not, is a big part of my spiritual practice because it feels like a walking meditation. Incense burning, and I know that might seem like, oh, okay, you can burn your incense, but it is very symbolic to a practice that I feel is an energetic release. And journaling is, as I just shared, is a huge, has been for probably 20 years I feel it's spiritual, it could be like considered psychological and, more personal development. But for me, I feel like I am connecting to a spiritual practice. But yeah, I would definitely say those are staples, and then they've spawned off into greater things, whether it's a sound bath meditation or retreats or, different things, but those are staples.
If somebody is going through this unfortunate grief process and they are scared and resistant to take any action to work at it, do you think can it lead to depression?
I don't want to just broad stroke and say absolutely yes, every single person that doesn't deal with their grief, it will. I would rather say that it will show up in some way of their life, but depression for sure is a big, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, or wrong thing as far as depression. We all experience depression, but then you have to ask the question, how is it keeping you from living a healthy, productive life? And if it's not, then, if they're not willing to take that action, it can lead to, some really detrimental things, of depression and not functioning, well in their lives. But I think it's fair to say that by not dealing with your grief, that can show up in many different things. It can show up in addiction. It can show up in workaholism, if you will. It can show up in a lot of different things,
Got it. And now no more questions on the grief process.
It's okay if you did, but.
So you moved to LA long time ago. You moved to Los Angeles for your music career.
Yes.
Are you still doing anything in your music industry?
Oh man, it's so funny you asked me that because I've just been, I'll just share something just because we're talking about spiritual, literally just yesterday. And I even called my mom and my friend Colette, where I thought, oh my gosh, this is a sign from the universe. But I did this meditation. And so I then woke up in the morning, and I swear this is answering a question, but I woke up in the morning and I took my dog for a walk. And so I kind of coming from this idea of this space of meditating and being in my mind. So I literally said out loud, okay, God or mastermind, I said these things, universe, my brother's name. And I said, this mastermind creative, what do you want me to do? What is the greatest way I can contribute in going forward? And right as I said that, literally a car drove and a license plate that said vocalist. And my heart just, because I was thinking it was going to be associated with my coaching career and expanding that, which it could be, because I only want to use my voice to raise awareness and educate and inspire and share and serve. But to answer your question about my music, that's been a little ache in me that I kind of went away from that a little bit because, my brother and I did do so much music together. And I did sing 2 years ago. I did a tribute concert to him but it just something just I have not been able to get back to. So I'm still figuring that out. But after that sign, I felt like, okay, I need to get back to my music. I do think that's since I was a very little girl, that was a huge dream of mine and a big part of my life and gift. And so I don't have the direct answer of what I'm going to do, but I do feel like something is brewing and
no worries.
Needs to be done. I need to sing. So
what's your favorite song?
Oh my God. You're really like going in. I don't, there's so many different favorite songs. So, oh man, that is a difficult question. I could talk so much on grief.
That you would like to sing at some point again in the future.
Yeah. Okay. So I would probably one of my favorite artists and singers is Etta James. So just had such an influence on me as a vocalist and a singer. So there's a song called Fool That I Am. And I just love that song so much. And that would probably be one, it has kind of like a jazz soul, which is, more what I do. So I would say that is one of them. Although, like I said, there are so many songs. I can't, as a singer, you can't just have one song. I mean, that could be a podcast in itself.
And what was your brother's favorite song?
Man, well, my brother, he was very influenced by a few. Cat Stevens, Bob Marley were two. And then there was more of just kind of like the pop, Jack Johnson and John Mayer and Dave Matthews, those kind of artists. But I would say Cat Stevens and Bob Marley were his biggest influences. And, funny, he and I, if we're going to tie into like songs, we were kind of known in our crew for a Bob Marley song called Waiting in Vain. And we did that duet. And that's a song that I have actually recently sung and will always be a part of my repertoire as I sing again and move forward in my music. Will always be including that song. And that was one of both of our favorite songs that we did together. So,
and in your old career, people always told you should be a therapist. You are amazing. You're a psychic. You should do this. You should do that. Why was it? What do you have, or what did you have?
You know what? I mean, I think that's a very good question. When you start reviewing your life, I'm 44, I'll be 45 in August. So I look back at even when I was a little young girl, and there are some threads that have woven up till now. So music and entertainment, acting, creative, always like that from as long as I remember. And that felt like that was it. I mean, I was just known for that. Then there was another part of me that also was a makeup artist. I was always doing all my girlfriends' makeup in high school. I didn't go to the school dances. I was the girl that was doing the makeup and then equally, I was the peer counselor. I was very into psychology and spirituality. And I was always giving my friends quotes, and I would be on the bus counseling them about, why so-and-so didn't go on the date with them. I mean, so I share this to say is these were all areas that I felt fueled by and energized by, and I was known for, right? I mean, I even recently saw in like my yearbook, thank you, you're the best counselor. I mean, this was when I was in high school. Well, those parts of me, I didn't really honor those parts of me. Because I was conditioned to think, well, I either had to be a singer or I had to be this. There wasn't an in between. I wanted to be known as a singer, so I sort of put a lot of that other stuff to the side.
These are the labels.
Yeah, these are the labels. Exactly. No, it's truly. But to your question, I would find that while I was in auditions, right, or when I was in the music industry, I managed recording studios and I did that for a long time. I would be dealing whether they were artists or singers or even my own bosses or, whoever it was, always like, you should be a therapist or, you're a psychic or how did you know that? And so that has been a common sentiment throughout my life, whatever area, whether I was doing makeup, whether I was singing, whether I was just a friend. And I think that calling and that, desire, I think it's just an innate ability. So when you ask, what is it? I think part of it is life experience. I've lived a lot of life. I've been through a lot of things that led me to be of service, as a crisis counselor in rape, domestic violence arena for a long time. And that's because that's part of my story. I was sexually abused as a young girl from the age of 4 to 9. So, and I've always been very open about that story. So I went on to be a mentor. I went on to volunteer. I went on to counsel, just as volunteer work. I've been through divorce. So I've lived a lot of that. So I would help, so there was just a part of me on not only soul seeking and seeking a spiritual path, but also helping others go through something similar because I've been through it. So there was always that element of service. And then I don't want to sound arrogant, but I think I'm starting to own more of a gift. No, because for a long time, I couldn't accept that there's some sort of insight, where I can see or sense truth or things happening before you're possibly ready to see that or see that. And that since I was little, like, oh my gosh, you're scaring me, you're a psychic, you're a freak, you're this, that. So, I think those are just terms that people will say when they don't understand how, someone that's attuned or astute or has a strong intuition. And so I would say that with all those elements and then also life experience.
How do you listen to your intuition? This is very interesting thing to me always.
Yeah, listening. Well, I can tell you when I don't. Right? We've all experienced ways in what it feels like when we don't and what it feels like when we do. I tend to be an overthinker. So my I think challenge has been what is intuition and what is me overthinking something. But how I listen to it is really, really tuning in. And I feel like we feel it, we can know it. And there's just a pure energy from that. And, that can come sometimes from meditation, but I mentioned hiking earlier. Honestly, even more than meditation, I've had some of the most profound awakenings because I'm just walking and I don't even really, I do listen to music sometimes, but a lot of times I'm just in the nature and just stuff comes to me or things happen or I'll get a sense. And that feeling, I can tell, is very different than if I'm overthinking something or trying to rationalize and process. And of course, you can draw from your intuition in those moments, but that purity, that just divine, I guess, download of information comes when I'm kind of in a just open-minded space and with no distractions. And definitely, even sometimes in my car, by the way, I would say it's the same type of thing when you're just driving. But that's how I access and listen to
So
it.
you create a space in your life to listen to that intuition. If your life is always full of busyness, then there is no opportunity to listen to the intuition.
100%. And even just what I said, sometimes it's when I was walking and I asked this very specific question and I said, show me evidence. I might not have mentioned that, but I said, show me evidence of what you want me to do going forward. So there was an opening and then I was open to receiving and I got a literal sign. Now it doesn't always happen that way, but literal sign of a license plate that said vocalist. So with the intuition, what does that mean? Does that mean that I was supposed to go home right then and there and sing and put something up on Instagram? Not necessarily, but I do think it was information to pay attention to. And okay, so then the question would be, okay, how does that resonate? And as I processed that later on down the through the day, I realized that, that is my original question was, how do you want me to show up and contribute in the world? What am I supposed to do? And I know that seems ridiculous. Why I'm asking, what am I supposed to do when I'm building a coaching practice and I'm doing all these things. But sometimes, especially in this quarantine, I was still like, okay, what's next is really what why I was sort of asking that question. And it came down to that. And what I felt intuitively was, well, it's all of it. It's using my voice even in today. When you reached out to me, it was like, if you recall, it was absolutely.
I can listen to your voice, very strong voice, Destiny.
So it's not necessarily about singing, even though I do think that was a message about singing, but the intuition in me said, that's how I'm going to contribute, whether that's writing something, whether it's raising a voice, that's speaking for the voiceless, it's being a vocalist and raising your voice.
And before we conclude our conversation, I want to ask you some very basic questions that I want to learn more about you.
Sure.
As a listener, if I'm listening to the show and I'm thinking, I have not gone through so much stuff like this, and I still want to be happy, I want to live a fulfilled life, but I haven't gone through any such tragedies in my life. I haven't gone through divorce. I haven't gone through this. What should I do, Destiny?
That is a great question. And what that question implies says I have to go through things in order to kind of find the nirvana or the, big ultimate happiness. I think my personal belief is this, and I'm not saying I'm right because I'm always questioning and always open, but everybody is on their journey and everybody has their destiny that they are to fulfill. For whatever reason, I have had quite some things to overcome, but I hope it's for a message or a purpose in my personal life. That doesn't negate or mean that someone that hasn't gone through those things means that they aren't going to evolve or become awakened or, be on a path. Everybody's, quote unquote tragedies also vary. Something that they're going through or struggling, might be a part of their own personal journey of their growth and expansion of what they need to experience. Equally, as much as I've gone through, there's many things I haven't gone through, thank goodness. So I would say to your listeners is that you have your own unique journey. And when we stay in our lane with that and always with that open heart, that open mind, staying curious, being willing, being open to receiving, to grow and expand, then that is limitless. And, I hope it's not through a lot of tragedy, quite frankly, but I don't think that means you can't find the gems and the wisdom and the depth because of that. I think you can get there either way. Sometimes, tragedy catapults you there. But I think you can really have a meaningful, productive, purposeful, deep, spiritual, and soulful life.
And it's about taking action. Somebody may have gone through any tragedy, but they may not be taking any action. And it's very profound. Absolutely. What you said, that everybody's on a unique path. And is we all are, at the core, we are same at the human being level. But what we differ is what we do and what we don't. But we are same. We all are human beings. We are spiritual beings having human experience on this earth, borrowing it from Dr. Wayne Dyer.
Absolutely. And if I could just mention one thing, another author that has changed my life, author Thomas More, and he has a book called Care of the Soul. And he has another book called Dark Night of the Soul, which talks more about, these tragedies and these dark parts of our lives. But I would say he is his teachings and writings are so profound. But if I were to generalize it to answer your question, is that we are all on a soul journey, and there are initiations of our soul that show up in so many different ways, whether that's a relationship, having a child. I'm not a mother. I wish I was, I wish I could say, but that's not something I've experienced. And, I'm open to that happening, but that might be something, a part of initiation. And even though people equate that to joy and the best thing that's happened in life, and in some ways it can also create, pain and other feelings. So I bring up that author because he talks about the fullness and holistic aspect of living. And our soul is always being initiated to go deeper, to go higher, to rise, to expand. And your life experience will help you get there, whatever that looks like.
Before I ask you my last question, I want to ask you, what kind of relationship you have with yourself?
Well, I like that question. That's a really good question. I think I have a really good, healthy relationship with myself. I drive myself nuts sometimes because I'm very OCD. I don't like to say OCD, like to label. And I actually know, people that really do have or equate that, but I do. I'm very organized and I drive myself nuts, but in all seriousness and silliness, I feel like I have a good, well-rounded relationship with myself. I'm very self-aware. I ask myself questions. I talk to myself, literally even in the grocery store where people will say, "What did you say?" And I'm like, no, sorry, just talking to myself over here. But I think I have a very strong, healthy, and soulful relationship with myself. So I really like that question. Thank you for asking.
My pleasure. And where can people find you online?
So they can find me. The cool thing about having my name, Destiny Rael, it's, for the most part, there's not a lot of me. There are a few other Destiny.
Everybody has destiny.
Everyone has a destiny, but not me. No. But basically, yeah, my website is destinyrael.com. My social media handles are all under my name, Destiny Rael. And, if any of your listeners, I want to just open it up if they want to DM me or reach out to me on my website if they have any specific questions. I'm pretty open. Even when you reach out to me, I think that's a testimony of that. I'm open-minded, and I always try to get back to people and communicate, because it's all destiny. So if someone's listening and they feel led and they feel called, please reach out to me. But that's pretty much, you can find me in any of those channels, I guess.
Can we find you in Los Angeles?
Yeah, you can find me wandering around in Los Angeles. Well, actually, not really. I mean, we're still on lockdown here, kind of. I mean, some things are slowly opening up, but I've been pretty much in my house and hiking. But yes, I'm in Los Angeles.
We won't put your address in the show notes, by the way, but I will find you in LA soon.
Yes. I would love to meet up at some point. So I really appreciate you having me on. And I love the spontaneity and the freedom of, but I love stuff like that. So
thank you, Destiny. It's been an amazing conversation. I hope our listeners will definitely learn a lot of tools and resources from this conversation.
I thank you so much as well, and wish you so much love and blessings, and truly an honor to be a part of your show. And I hope so as well.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode today. I hope you learned from this episode that you can apply in your life. If you did enjoy this, please subscribe to the podcast, The Nishant Garg Show, on Apple Podcast. You can also subscribe to the show through my website, https://nishantgarg.me, NISHANTGARG.me. You can also share this podcast with your family and friends or whoever want to feel fulfilled. And thank you so much again.